Thank you for watching our presentation on the Regional District of Nanaimo Secondary Suites project. The purpose of this presentation is to raise public awareness of the project, provide basic information about secondary suites, and facilitate further discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to provide a brief overview of what I'll be talking about. I will start by providing an overview of the project so that you understand why the Regional District of Nanaimo is considering secondary suites and where the project came from. Next, I will provide a basic overview of secondary suites, including what they are, as well as some of the issues and considerations that should be factored in when considering secondary suites. Finally, I will go over the various ways that the community can participate in the process. Why are we doing this? The Regional District of Nanaimo completed a Housing Action Plan in January 2011. The Housing Action Plan recommended actions related to the consideration of secondary suites within electoral areas A, C, E, F, G, and H. Therefore, the Regional District of Nanaimo Secondary Suites Project is a way of implementing the actions identified in the Housing Action Plan. On January 25, 2011, the board directed staff to prepare a background study. The study was received on May 28, 2013, and the board also approved a consultation plan for the purpose of approaching the community to get feedback on whether or not secondary suites are supported in the electoral areas, and if so, what form should they take. The Regional District of Nanaimo is seeking community input on secondary suites to determine if there is support for secondary suites in the Regional District of Nanaimo electoral areas. This is important because secondary suites can help address housing affordability in the region by increasing the number of affordable rental and market housing units designed to meet the needs of lower income residents with different household sizes, ages, and special needs. The Regional District of Nanaimo Secondary Suite Project includes 4 phases. Phase 1 is the completion of a background study which was completed in May 2013. Phase 2 of the project is public consultation for the purpose of gauging community support for secondary suites. Following the completion of Phase 2, staff will compile the results and prepare a report to the board which summarizes the community's responses and provides options and recommendations on how to proceed. If there's community support for secondary suites, the final phase of the project is to initiate amendments to the Regional District of Nanaimo zoning bylaws and official community plans. This phase will require additional community input on specific policy and regulatory options. What is a secondary suite? There are many different definitions of secondary suite. For the purpose of this project, a secondary suite is an additional dwelling unit on a property which is accessory to a principal dwelling unit on the same property. A secondary suite is a separate unit with its own entrance, bathroom, sleeping and living area, and cooking facilities. Generally speaking, most local governments adopt the definition of secondary suite contained in the BC Building Code, which includes a maximum size of 90 square meters of finished floor area, or 40% of the living floor space of the building it's located in. Also, under this definition, a secondary suite must be located within a dwelling and cannot be subdivided. The BC Building Code was amended in 1995 to specifically address the construction of secondary suites. This section of the code provides reduced building standards for secondary suites. It's important to note that in order for a secondary suite to be constructed under the reduced building code standard, it must meet the definition of secondary suite contained in the code. Local government can permit larger suites or detached suites. However, they would be subject to the full building code requirements. Secondary suites can take on many different forms. For example, a secondary suite can be on the top floor of a home. A secondary suite can also be on the bottom floor of a home. A secondary suite can also be attached to a home at grade. Although it doesn't meet the definition of secondary suite in the BC Building Code, Secondary suites can also be detached and within an accessory building. A number of issues have been identified so far. These are factors that need to be considered as part of the secondary suites project. The first is parking. This is an important consideration that warrants further thought. Because of their smaller size and generally lower number of occupants when compared to a typical dwelling unit, the number of additional parking spaces required is generally lower than that of a typical dwelling unit. However, parking is a common concern amongst community members. Many local governments who allow secondary suites have addressed this issue by requiring one additional parking space for a secondary suite, or by allowing for on-street parking to reduce additional impervious surface created by parking areas. Water and sewer servicing is another consideration. This is especially important because there are many areas unserviced throughout the Regional District of Nanaimo that rely on individual well and septic disposal systems. Typically, secondary suites have a minimal additional demand on these on-site systems. However, it is important to know that the on-site services can accommodate the addition of a secondary suite on a case-by-case basis. Another issue to consider is how to create an equitable approach for the application of user fees such as garbage and recycling and water and sewer services where provided. Site occupancy is another issue that can cause concern. The concern is generally in relation to who occupies the suite and in the case of absentee owners, who would occupy the dwelling. This has been raised as a concern in relation to property maintenance. From a legal perspective, it is difficult for local government to deal with suite occupancy. Therefore, if this becomes a local concern, careful consideration would have to be given towards how to handle suite occupancy. Addressing an emergency response is also a concern. From a safety perspective, it is important for first responders to be able to locate secondary suites. This can be especially difficult in remote or rural areas that are not well marked. Consideration should be given to how secondary suites are addressed and identified. There are a number of other considerations that are important when contemplating secondary suites. Some of these include the location or where secondary suites should be permitted. When considering location, it is important to think about the needs of the likely tenants of secondary suites, including seniors, young moms and adults leaving home for the first time, students, people with a physical disability, and in general, lower income residents. Some of these groups may not be able to afford a car or may not be in a physical condition that allows them to drive. Therefore, it's important to consider secondary suites in close proximity to transit, local goods and services such as a grocery store, schools, and employment. The number of secondary suites per lot that should be allowed is another thing that the community needs to weigh in on. Many rural zones allow more than one dwelling unit on a property. Allowing a secondary suite in each dwelling unit on a property could result in undesirable impacts to the community, including loss of rural character, privacy, and noise. The size, height, appearance, and placement of secondary suites on a lot should be considered, as these design characteristics can have a visual impact on a neighborhood. We all know there are numerous unauthorized secondary suites throughout the community, and it is recognized that they are an important form of rental housing in the region. The question remains, how should the Regional District of Nanaimo handle the enforcement of secondary suite rules, and how should the RDN handle situations where owners come forward wanting to legalize existing secondary suites? We want your input on how you think the Regional District of Nanaimo should handle existing suites. Existing secondary suites pose some unique challenges. When dealing with existing suites, most local governments focus on basic life and safety requirements. There is a distinction made between new construction and existing secondary suites. Unlike newly proposed suites, which must satisfy all requirements of the current building code, existing suites can be considered under reduced code requirements which focus on life and safety provisions and allow more flexibility to address existing construction. Also, when considering existing suites, another thing to keep in mind is the impact that decisions have on the availability of affordable rental housing in the region, as secondary suites are a recognized and important source of affordable housing. There are a number of different ways that community members, neighborhood groups, and organizations with an interest in secondary suites can participate in the process. This includes presentations, an online survey, the use of social media such as Facebook and Twitter, an email alert system which allows users to sign up to receive periodic updates on the project by email, focus groups, and attendance at community events. This concludes our short presentation on the Regional District of Nanaimo Secondary Suites project. For more information, please visit the project website at www.rdnsecondarysuites.ca. If you have any questions or comments, please contact Greg Keller, Senior Planner at the Regional District of Nanaimo. Thank you for watching.